Welcome to the HR Chat Show, one of the world's most downloaded and shared podcasts designed for HR pros, talent execs, tech enthusiasts, and business leaders. For hundreds more episodes and what's new in the world of work, subscribe to the show, follow us on social media, and visit hrgazette.com.
Welcome to a very, very, very special episode of the HR Chat podcast. This, ladies and gentlemen, is episode 900, a milestone that gives us the perfect excuse to reflect on how the world of work has evolved and, more importantly, where it's heading next. 900 episodes. That actually happens to coincide pretty much to the day with 10 years of the HR Chat pod. So I should just start by thanking you, the listeners, for your continued support, to all of the wonderful hosts of the show over the years, including Pauline, Matt, Tim, Chris, and many, many more. I was looking back over the list of some of the guests that we've had on the show over those 10 years and 900-ish episodes. And they're from brands such as Microsoft, IBM, Amazon Web Services, SAP, ADP, HR Tech Conference, Sherm, Gartner, McKinsey, Deloitte, Disrupt, UPS, NASA, Virgin, Ceridian, Bright Horizons, NFP, Wireless Logic, Pharma, AWS, Government of Canada, Make-A-Wish Foundation, Coca-Cola, and so many more. And some of the names that you might recognize include Josh Person, Dave Ulrich, Jennifer McClure, Perry Timms, John Ingham, David Rock, Kevin Oakes, Ben Eubanks, Brian Kropp, Steve Brown, the nicest man in HR on that side of the pond, Tim Sackett, William Tincup, Valerie Keevers-Workman, Q Hamarani, Christina Laconi, Mary Cullen, Dr. Mary Collins, Carol Atkinson, Joe Yarker, Lindsay Claiborne, Danny Stacey, Chris Locke, Ankita Poddar, Barry Winkless, John Kennedy, Russell Robinson, James Davies, Rob Rosenthal, Tom McCartney, Ben Monez, David Duckworth, Steve Foulger, Chris Bjorling, of course, Jessica Kriegel, Roger Clements, Al Kingsley, and the awesome Stephen Shadletsky. That is a pretty impressive list of brands and guests we've had on this show over the years, and I am terribly, terribly grateful, as are the other members of the team. We hope that you continue to enjoy our little podcast. We've been going for a while, and we continue to do so. And the next landmark coming up for us, of course, will be the big 1,000. So for this particular episode, for episode 900, I'm joined by someone who has consistently challenged conventional thinking while remaining grounded in what actually works in organizations. He is an absolute gent. He is the co-organizer of Disrupt Manchester and Disrupt London with me. He is my friend. And that's Steve Foulger, a strategic HR leader and CIPD fellow whose career has spanned financial services, manufacturing, technology, government, and entrepreneurial businesses. Steve has led major organizational transformations, restructures, workforce redesigns, M&A integrations, industrial relations, and business change, while also overseeing functions including legal, facilities, health and safety, security, and operations. Many listeners to the show know Steve from the Disrupt community, where he's become renowned for asking difficult questions, cutting through the hype, and reminding HR professionals to focus on outcomes rather than trends. And just a couple of weeks ago, Mr. Foulger was very, very brave when he took on a pretty crazy challenge at our Disrupt London event in the center of the city, where he presented 20 slides in 5 minutes, rotating every 15 seconds, but he had no idea of what the slides would be until they came up on the screen. So kudos to you, Steve. And in this conversation, we're going to explore what's genuinely exciting Steve about today's HR landscape, from workforce planning and energy management to high performance cultures, and what concerns him, including AI hype, performative thought leadership, the decline of collaboration, and why some of HR's biggest challenges remain surprisingly unresolved. Okay, there's a lot to get through today. I hope you enjoy this conversation that I had with my friend for episode 900, Mr. Steve Foulger. Steve, the awesomeness Foulger, welcome back to the show and welcome to episode 900. How are you doing, my friend?
Yeah, really good, thank you, and congratulations on 900 episodes. What an effort.
My goodness me, that's a misspent youth if ever I've heard of one. No, it's it's been a journey. It's been a journey. 10 years in the coming. We've had some amazing guests on the show over the years, but I can't think of anyone that I'd rather celebrate episode 900 with than my very good friend Steve Foulger, listeners. Steve, you have been on the show before, but just as a recap, beyond the introduction that I offered a moment ago, why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself, your career background, and what gets you up in the morning?
Yeah, sure. So I've got an extensive career background. Anyone that kind of looks at my details will realise I've worked for all sorts of people doing all sorts of things. I've been very lucky in my career to kind of be involved in some huge groundbreaking projects, but most of it's in the world of change and transformation, or in the people space, or as we used to call it, HR. Stuff that gets me up in the morning. The reason I stepped into this and stopped being a mortgage consultant over 20 years ago was because of the variety. You face something new every day, and I love variety, and I love trying to solve problems.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the HR Chat Podcast. If you enjoy the audio content we produce, you'll love our articles on the HR Gazette. Learn more at hrgazette.com. And now, back to the show.
I don't know if I ever knew that you're a mortgage consultant. Okay, that's interesting. That could come in handy in the future. I may come back and pick your brains, my friend. Okay, so here we are, episode 900. Thanks again for joining us to celebrate that. When you look back, Steve, over your own HR career, what are some of the biggest shifts that you've seen in the profession, and what do you think we've genuinely got better at?
In a lot of ways, the shifts haven't been huge. There's been a lot of relabeling. There's been a lot of talk of progress. But quite often I go into support businesses and the same old problems are already there. Definitely have seen some changes. So what was personnel became HR. What became HR became probably about 10 different things because no one can quite agree on what the latest labelling is going forward. I've definitely seen some very specific things. So as you'll know, I've done quite a bit of work in the M&A space. And originally when you used to go into the data rooms, they were physical data rooms for absolutely full of data for you to kind of review. Normally you were on a clock and you got to get in, find out the data you needed and get out. Now they're virtual data rooms, and there's so much in the public domain you can go and find stuff out way before a transaction starts anyway. But I think there's been some really good stuff like engagement surveys. A lot more companies now use kind of pulse. So I think engagement surveys have a place, but I think you need more regular, up-to-date information. Annual appraisals, I'm glad to start seeing the back of those. They're becoming things like one-to-ones, training in the way I used to see it when I first came in, becoming proper learning and development. So I think there's definitely progress and people are looking at things, and there was all sorts of things that I looked at and thought, why do we do it like that? It doesn't make any sense. And I started to see some sense starting to come through. I thought it was me, but I definitely am seeing some better things coming out in the world.
Very good, very good. So you've said that benchmarking remains surprisingly immune to AI, and that's an interesting perspective. In a world obsessed, Steve, with generative AI, why do you think that benchmarking and learning from what other organizations are actually doing still provides such enduring value?
Yeah, I think there's two questions most organizations want answered. If you look at it at a micro level, so down to an individual, everyone wants to know, with whatever change or whatever's happening, what's in it for me. At an organizational level, certainly at a strategic level, it's what's everyone else doing. And benchmarking fits lovely into that space because when you're doing compensation benchmarking, you're answering the question, what's in it for me? Because you're telling someone what they're going to get paid. And at the organizational level, you're telling them what everyone else is doing. But AI is definitely something where there's a lot of noise at the moment. I'm sure we'll go on to it later. There's a lot of negative noise and a lot of positive noise. But we've been doing loads of testing recently around benchmarking. And I can tell you that AI cannot do benchmarking at the moment. I'll give you a very quick example. We found one role, and it was one role, that was 1,400% out versus the real data that was out there. And in the world where we're heading, where pay transparency will put more data into the world, you'd think it'd be easier. But actually, if you don't validate the data, if you don't understand the data, it frankly becomes meaningless. And at the moment, I would say every single role we look at is out by at least 5% when you put it through the AI tools. It is getting better, but only slightly better. But it's a great example where you can't use AI as a calculator. It's not a calculator. It provides you with answers it thinks you want. The problem is it provides them with such confidence. Some people out there believe every answer it provides.
Okay, so we're not there yet. How long until that calculator is reliable? What are we looking at? Are we looking at 6 months? Are we looking at 12 months? Are we looking at 24? Are we never going to get there?
I think there will be tools that are built that will utilize AI in a really effective way, but I think we're at least 5 years away from a proper practical tool where it's in there, because you're still going to have to get the data. You're still going to have to tell it the right prompts. We're trying new prompts every day. So we literally put every role we look at through 3 different processes. 1, through the actual tools. 2, through AI in terms of basic prompts. What does the basic prompt for us? And then 3, we're constantly wrestling with how can we get this prompt better? Because we'd love AI to be the answer. But based on our research so far and based on what we're looking at, if we're using AI in terms of the generic tools that are out there to find us the answer, it won't find it at the moment. We're years away from that. If it's about building the tools and interrogating databases, then I don't think we're far away at all. For some organisations, they may already be there if they've got the right data already.
Do you think it's a competitive advantage, Steve, if you're a smaller company and you be more nimble and you can try new AI tools compared to one of the big boys that perhaps they're a bit slower? They have a lot more processes in place. That it's harder to experiment. But of course, conversely, they're better resourced. But what's your take on that?
Yeah, it doesn't have to be more complex, but it does tend to be. And I think that probably comes down to the commercial reality of the world they're dealing with. And they've spent years doubling down on their tools, investing in certain ways of working. To reverse out of that or to suggest suddenly that their tools aren't as valuable as they thought they were doesn't make a lot of commercial sense. I remember talking to a huge organisation who I won't name about pay transparency, and they were saying it's going to be a brilliant opportunity for them and it's going to make a world of difference. And I said to them, won't it kill your benchmarking overnight? And this before I'd done any of the research or gone and played around with the tools. And they said, don't talk about that. And the reality is you have to consider that. You have to be future ready, and you've got to do what's best for the client. You've got to do what's best for providing answers, not what can I do to double down on our commercial model.
Now, one topic that you've become increasingly interested in of late is energy management. We're not talking global warming here. How is managing people's energy different from managing productivity or well-being? And why do you think it's becoming such an important leadership capability?
In some ways, I don't think it is that different. So you'll know from just one of the answers I've given before, and also conversations we've had and presentations we do, I talk about the micro and the macro. The macro for me is the organisation and the ecosystem and the economy it operates in, and the micro is the individual and how they operate within an organisation. And I think we're always looking at what's best for you, what's best for your business, and what's best for your team. It's kind of looking across the whole piece and kind of working out. And when you're looking at productivity and you look at energy, quite often the two are interlinked. Obviously, we've got a world going forward where we're looking at AI coming in, we've got automation coming in, and for a lot of worlds that's already there. You can go back hundreds of years and think about car manufacturing, how much stuff they've put into there to automate processes over time. So it's always that thing of looking at, are we better placed here to upskill individuals, increase productivity, or can we put a machine in place here? And you have to ask that question all the time. before you can kind of get to the answer. We used to say, what's your organisational design to a client? And they'd tell us what their organisational structure is. We get a structure chart. But of course, that doesn't tell us how things interact. But from an energy point of view, when they're looking at machines, when they're looking at the buildings they're operating in, they're talking about ESG. They're talking about making sure they're efficient and effective. I don't see that language being any different for an individual. How can I be efficient and effective? A very quick example, I've got a team at the moment. I focus on what we call 5 to 25, which is 5 actions per day that make a commercial difference. It either makes money, saves money, or saves time. By the end of the week, you've got 25 actions you put in place that have made a difference. I'd love it if they could create me all the value from doing one action every week. That'd be perfect. Be the most efficient, it'd be the most effective.
So regular listeners of this pod will know that we've done loads of episodes in the past on lessons that the corporate world can take from the world of elite sports. In fact, we did a whole season on this for the People and Performance pod, which is another show that I co-host with the awesome Chris Bjorling. One thing that you didn't mention earlier about yourself, in addition to being a mortgage broker, an HR pro, and a superstar, and a dad, and an all-round awesome bloke, is you were also a professional sportsman. You're a soccer player for our US and Canadian listeners. And of course, you've spoken very positively about what organizations can get if they borrow ideas from elite sport to build those high-performing cultures. Which lessons transfer well into the workplace, Steve, and which sporting analogies should HR probably stop using?
I think the first one is to not overstate elite sport, because I definitely was an elite sport. Bill, I played a bit of second team football for Warsaw at schoolboys and slightly beyond that. And then when I got paid to play for a few semi-professional teams, but nothing beyond that. So the first thing is kind of let's not overstate elite sport. As you know, I've got to work with some fantastic elite sports people who've represented England in different sports. And I talk to them all the time and find out about what goes on in their world and find out what can be transferred into our world. And it is an area that is kind of ripe all of the time for helping businesses think in a different way. You think back to the marginal gain stuff we've talked about in the past. If you think about the fact how much mindset matters, that's the same in organizations as is it in sports. Setting targets is important. Meticulous preparation is important. You can learn so much from sports stars around that. And I suppose where they have the advantage is they do a lot of practice in the week, say, for 90 minutes on a Saturday or 10 seconds over a sprint at a race. They're kind of honing themselves for that very specific time. When we're at work, there's probably an expectation we're running the speed of a 100-metre sprint for the whole of the 5 days we're in work, or 4 days if you do a 4-day week. But, there's a lot of nonsense as well that doesn't transfer across. And, I hate it when I'm sat in a meeting and I hear, let's all give 100% on this, or let's give 110%, which obviously is mathematically impossible. It's a game of two halves. It's all the cliches that we definitely don't need to bring over from sport. And I think if anyone's watching the World Cup, we could also do without the hydration breaks.
Yeah, I would agree with that, or quarters, as they're being called, right? So you just briefly mentioned the fact that you've had the opportunity to work with a bunch of folks who were elite sports people who played for England. One of those is the awesome John Slightholme, a former England rugby national player. I would encourage folks to listen to HR Chat episode 760? Gosh, that was a while ago. With John, absolute gentleman. It was nice to see you and him at the CIPD Festival Work event recently. Listeners, do check that out. Anyway, continuing through. Steve, you challenge a number of popular HR narratives because you're just that kind of guy. From culture ads replacing culture fit to influencers chasing algorithms instead of building communities. How dare they? Do you think HR sometimes falls too quickly in love with new terminology rather than solving the underlying business problems?
Absolutely. And like Bill, given its 900th episode for you today, I'd like to give you massive credit for building huge communities and disrupt through your podcasts. You're always kind enough to introduce people to other people. You see where the potential value might be. There's an awful lot of people out there in your world that don't do that, and they're all about themselves. They're all about ego, and they're all about getting their next like and their next share. One of the things I love spending time with you for and working with you for is the fact that you build those communities. And that's great in the real world as well, in terms of business world. And that you mentioned about cultural add and cultural fit. I've seen a lot of people putting stuff out there about the fact that stop hiring for people with cultural fit, hire for people with cultural add. And my view on it is really simple. You can hire for both. I think in football management terms, was it FIFA, the computer game, they call it chemistry. So we can still have a diverse workforce, just like we can have a diverse football team. But if the players don't gel together and they don't fit together and they don't work together, you've got a problem. It's another analogy of bringing elite sport into kind of the world. So I think for me, it is really important to have cultural add, but it's really important to have cultural fit as well. And I think it's about knowing which of the bits you're looking for cultural fit on and which of the bits you're looking for cultural add on. And they can be exclusive. If you're not looking for a diverse workforce, you've got a problem, in my opinion. So that doesn't mean you can't look for the ads, but you should be looking for, is this person going to flourish in this environment? Are they going to add something? Are we going to let them add something? That's where the cultural fit, cultural add starts to become attention. But I think there's a lot of noise out there. We talk about cultural add before we'd have just said, will this person add value? It's a bit like when we're to pay transparency. Before we'd have just said, are you advertising the salary? It's a bit like when we say, have you got a listening strategy? Before we'd have just said, have you got any feedback? We've kind of made all of this stuff more complicated than it needs to be. And I think we do kind of get stuck up in new terminology. And again, I think that's a corporate way because everyone's trying to sell their solution and they're focused on, rather than what's the best thing for the organization you're working with, it's like, let me sell you my solution and my terminology. And people do like to make other people feel stupid, and I don't like that.
Why do they do that, Steve? No, let's not go down that route. These episodes aren't long enough. That's a conversation for another time. Thank you very much for your kind words just a moment ago, by the way. Regular listeners of this show will know that I am not, however, scared of the occasional promo for other episodes or other things that I'm getting up to. The most popular LinkedIn post I've had over the last couple of years, honestly, despite all those efforts to get more clicks, was a photo I posted when we had our second child, and that got gazillions of likes and comments. So that
Amazing.
told me all I've got to do is have a new baby every year. We'll keep up in those rankings. To be continued, listeners. Steve, we are already coming towards the end of this particular conversation. I now want to flip those compliments back on you. You and I have known each other for a very long time now.
Yep.
It wasn't super easy for me, honestly, when I moved back to the UK. I was gone for so long. I didn't have much of a network over here. I was struggling. I was missing being over in beautiful Toronto, Canada. I wouldn't change anything for the world. I've now got a beautiful family here in the UK. That said, the events that I've been involved with have given me an opportunity to meet loads of cool people. Some of them, just like you said a second ago, unfortunately are in it for themselves. And there are another group, a select group of people like yourself who are just awesome, authentic, genuine, kind human beings. So there's going to be a question in a minute, but I just want to say for the record, so listeners, Steve and I, we've been organising the Disrupt HR events in London and in Manchester together now for a long time. And Steve's he's just a lovely human being. He's great. He's always helpful. He's kind. I've got to meet his son, who is a reflection of Steve as well, and the upbringing that Steve has given him. And to top it all off, last week after Disrupt London, I missed my final train home. Who did I call? I called Stevie F, and I said, "Steve, I'm in trouble." He said, "Don't worry about it, mate. You can come and stay with me. You can stay in my hotel room with me." And there's just another wonderful example of how cool Steve is. So with all that, here comes the question. Steve, as someone who's been part of the Disrupt HR movement for years, and we celebrate this 900th episode of the HR Chat Show, what advice would you give to the next generation of HR leaders who want to maybe build careers based on substance, based on being authentic rather than hype? And should they focus on what over the next decade? What are those key things to get them to that point over the next decade?
Yeah, I mean, Bill, if you've got a spare bed in your hotel room and one of your friends is stuck, who wouldn't help someone? And I think that's a good thing for kind of the next generation to focus on as well. You know, forget about all the hype. It's about having a great network and helping each other. You gave the wonderful opportunity for me to bring Jacob on stage. My son, who you mentioned a minute ago, up in Manchester, that went down really well. We got so many people coming up and talking to him and complimenting him on what a lovely young man he is, and he really is. It's lovely when you say he's a reflection of me, but he's way better than I am. He's better at football than me as well. And I think you're kind of in a situation where, as you're going forward, we can't afford to lose the human side of things. And there's some brilliant stuff going on at the moment in the world where people are trying to humanize the workplace again. And there's a lot of people kind of trying to go the other way. That's because we're in a bit of a divisive world. So don't get caught up in the divisive world. Think about being collaborative. Think about being compassionate. Think about being curious. Think about being adaptable. Don't get bogged down in the textbooks and don't get bogged down in the hype. The best thing you can do is get out there, meet people, listen and learn, and let your gut tell you what's right. There's lots of exciting things coming ahead. You don't need to get involved in the hype. A lot of the early adopters and the people who think they've got the right answers will disappear. They'll burn through their cash on solutions that were never right for everybody else, talking nonsense, while the people who've really grasped things will bring it to your door anyway.
Wise words indeed. Okay, just to wrap up today, just finally, and of course there will be links in the show notes, but very briefly, Steve, what are the best ways to connect with you? Is that LinkedIn? Do you want to share your email address? I bet you are all over the TikToks and the Instagrams and stuff because you're so cool. Tell us more.
Yeah, I'm so cool. Yeah, I'm nearly 50, Bill, and that's not been said to me for a long, long time, if ever. But yeah, LinkedIn is definitely the best way to come and find me. So, I have an unusual last name, not unusual in HR. Apparently, there are a couple of other Foulgers out there, but definitely come and find me on LinkedIn. That's by far the best way. And then when we start chatting on there, I'll give you my email address and we'll kind of go from there. And we'll pass out the phone number as well. But LinkedIn, definitely the way to go with me. That's where I spend a lot of my time.
Excellent. Well, that just leaves me to say for this a very special 900th episode, Steve, I love you, man. You're the best, and I appreciate your time.
You too, Bill. Congratulations on 900. Can't wait to see who's on 1,000.
And listeners, as always, until next time, happy working.
Thanks for listening to the HR Chat Show. If you enjoyed this episode, why not subscribe and listen to some of the hundreds of episodes published by HR Gazette? And remember, for what's new in the world of work, subscribe to the show, follow us on social media, and visit hrgazette.com.